Hi everyone, it's me and welcome to today's video. We're doing our June monthly wrap up. So sit down, grab a snack because we're going to be chatting for a while. The first book that I finished in June was Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is my first R.F. Kuang book and I find R.F. Kuang's writing very beautiful and believable. She has the ability to introduce a character and fill my empathy buckets for them within only a few pages, and I fully appreciate what she's delivering. You can tell that her writing is informed by so much research. This book is set in Oxford and it's about over a period of a little bit more than a decade. It is from when our main protagonist, Robin, is a teenager up until his first few years at Oxford University. And I think the time period is approximately from 1828 to 1836. And this book was a very political read. I will say that I enjoyed it a lot. I rated it 4 stars. And it's just one of those books that I know as I'm reading it, I realize that this is going to be a book that stays with me for a very long time afterwards. And there's something about R.F. Kuang's ability to use fantasy to speak politically about a reality that a lot of people have faced and in some ways are still facing today. The characters that she creates, the atmosphere, the thematic content that this book follows, and the messaging behind the story, there's something so poignant and meaningful, memorable, impactful about her work. It's the only book of hers that I've read, as I mentioned, and I'm really enjoying her work so far. It's full of characters with unique histories. Robin, the main character, as I mentioned, in many ways he reflects the reader because we learn about the world through his eyes. We experience the same trepidation and uncertainty as we grapple with the dark secrets that this world holds. We witness his struggle with his 2 identities, as he's not sure which path to take, not knowing which path will be beneficial to him and also beneficial to the greater good. I feel like we watch Robin in this world step up to the task that is called on him, and we watch him kind of lose his uncertainty as he makes his decision towards the end. And this is a book that I would list as not only a favorite but a book that has changed my perception of the world forever and has added to the way that I experience life and the things that I know and the things that I think about as well. This book is often talked about as a story of revolution, and that is true, and I think it hits a lot deeper because it's very similar to the world that we are living in today, and it's set during the period of colonialization. And even though the rules of that society are different, the exploitation of people is something that we are very familiar with today. I would say that the themes in this book are definitely the excess of the British Empire, the power of language, the loss of language, and there's also discussion around what it's like to exist in this world and society that we live in as a foreigner or as someone who is different from what's expected or normal. I really liked this book and I felt like it was extremely well written, but on one hand as well, I felt like there were some points where a lot of the themes were over explained to us, but I still found that it explored so many important and interesting themes and the characters were amazing. I'm just going to read a little quote that stuck with me. "So what does that tell you, Birdie? If they're going to tell stories about you, use it to your advantage. The English are never going to think I'm posh, but if I fit into their fantasy, then they'll at least think I'm royalty." I think context would probably add more to that, but that was just one of the many moments that stuck out to me in this book. And it was kind of along the lines of her talking about how it is to exist in this world as a POC. This book is very impactful, but it's also incredibly educational. I learned so much about language from this book, and for me it's the perfect balance of education and plot. It's quite a large book, but everything that happens is needed, and I almost wish that the ending part was a bit longer because it felt very rushed compared to the pace of the previous parts in the book. And this book covers so many topics, but one of my favorite things that the book touched on was the effect of translation between languages. And here in the book, relating to that, which seems right to you, do we try our hardest as translators to render ourselves invisible? Or do we remind our reader that what they're reading was not written in their native language? That's an impossible question, said Victoire. Either you situate the text in its time and place, or you bring it to where you are here and now. You're always giving something up. Is faithful translation impossible then? Professor Playfair challenged. Can we never communicate with integrity across time, across space? I suppose not, Victoire said reluctantly. So it's just like things I've never even thought about before coming to the forefront in this book, which is what I love to learn. I would highly recommend Babel. It might not be her best entry point because it is so political, but I could not put it down once I started. Another thing is check out the content warnings because there is a bit of violence in this book, so check out the full list of trigger warnings for this book before you dive into it. I just have this feeling that Kuang is going to become one of my favorite authors. It's just something so bold and educated and political and unapologetic about the way that she wrote this book. It really is something that I want to read more of. The next book is one that I did not have the greatest time with, and it is Under the Udala Trees. This is a historical fiction romance novel that is set in Nigeria, Ojoto, and it follows the difficulties of a young lesbian girl in wartime Nigeria. We follow a young girl, Ijoma, who's caught up in the middle of a war with her home state at the center of conflict, and she's a young girl that has grown up with God firmly on her shoulders, but due to this period of war, she's separated from the people that she loves, some temporary and some permanently, and through a series of events she finds a young girl who she quickly clicks with. And in this book we get to see how queer love in 1950s Nigeria is drawn against culture and religion, and the love that the character experiences exists as both a refuge and a challenge. And unfortunately, I didn't like the book. I only gave it 2 stars, which is a bit of a 180 compared to the first book that I read, Babel. I'm not really sure what to say because I know that this book has so many amazing reviews on Goodreads, so it just has to be that a lot of other people enjoyed this book more than I did. It genuinely started off very promising. I enjoyed the portrayal of the war and the cultural lines that led to those circumstances and how it ultimately concluded. And I was interested in how the romance would show the characters of that time who have both religious and cultural differences. The concept was very nice, but the execution did not meet the mark for me. My enjoyment of the book probably stopped after the first part of the book. It's divided into 5 parts. The writing just felt very stilted. It consisted of very short chapters, which I felt did not build the story enough for me. They just felt like their main goal was to have punchy one-liners at the end of the chapter, which you can still do. You can still create webs and draw references back to other parts in the book and have impact, but it just felt so disconnected. It just felt very flat in some cases, like with the characters. We never really delved into what Ichioma's counterparts were feeling, and there was a lot of focus on religion, but from an angle that felt to me incongruent. From when she is 13 years old up until when she's older as well. I wish the author had spent more time explaining why Ijoma feels certain ways about her sexuality in relation to her religion at the time, because it kind of changes and morphs. But overall, the plot of the story was good, following her until she ultimately has accepted herself much later in the future. But the execution of the characters and making sure that we understand them was not well done. And sometimes the main character came across as quite self-absorbed without considering other people's emotions and why they might be reacting in a certain way. I think I just had very different expectations to this book. It's very different from what I imagined it was going to be, but I have to say that I didn't enjoy this one, unfortunately. After that, I went right back into the deep end, and that was with 1984 by George Orwell. This is a dystopian novel, but it is such an impactful and important read that I've been wanting to read for a very, very long time, and I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving the book 5 stars, not because it's completely perfect, but because it was so well thought out, and it honestly has changed my perspective forever Now, this novel follows Winston, and he's a resident of a fictional country called Oceania, and in this country, war is constant, people are watched, and thoughts are controlled. Winston grew up before the world that he knew, aka London, was turned into the world that he faces today. He has a growing resentment to the ruling party, and in whatever way possible, he desires to find out information about the fragile reality he inhabits. And he's doing all of that while trying to project the image of a good party member. We follow Winston through his exploration of his reality as he deals with increasing paranoia. Winston encounters a young woman named Julia, and she's part of the Anti-Procreation League, who are enlisted with promoting celibacy outside of procreation, and together they begin an illicit affair. And we follow Winston as he tries to remember what led to the society that he's living in today. And a constant question that we have to ask ourselves is what he believes true? What is the meaning of truth? And does he have the courage to believe his own memories? This book gave a very full picture of a dystopian society. So many elements were very, very well considered, but I really liked it because even though the power motives were explained for the most part, they also left a lot of room to speculate about more of what happens in Oceania. In the book, the year 2030 is mentioned as sort of the year where everything is completed, or the goal year, and it's just very interesting to see that almost 100 years later from when this book was written in the 1940s, we're going to be coming up to 2030 pretty soon. And the question we'll have to ask ourselves now is, how much of this book is true? If you're ever thinking to yourself, how much worse can this whole thing get? I recommend you read 1984. And there is one quote that I want to read, which was extremely impactful to me. In a way, the worldview of the party imposed itself most successfully on people incapable of understanding it. They could be made to accept the most flagrant violations of reality because they never fully grasped the enormity of what was demanded of them, and they were not sufficiently interested in public events to notice what was happening. By lack of understanding, they remained sane. They simply swallowed everything, and what they swallowed did them no harm because it left no residue behind, just as a grain of corn will pass undigested through the body of a bird. Very good. Next, I read Hood Feminism, and I didn't have the best time with this. There was a lot of information which I learned, but ultimately, I don't think this was the book for me. That was because of many things, but I think the thing that stood out the most was that the language was very clunky, and the premise of each chapter led to very similar conclusions each and every time, with a lot of repeated information. I felt it just wasn't adding up for me, and it was kind of taking me out of the message at times, but it did have really good moments which I related to and which I enjoyed. So I rated the book 3 stars, but I'm glad that I read it and I know what it's about because it is very, very popular book, and it is also an important book. But I felt like the second half of the chapters usually dragged, and we kind of moved from topic to topic without warning or without discernible connection. So I usually felt quite fatigued at the end of each chapter. And I just think that there are other better written feminist novels, and ultimately I'm glad that I picked it up, but just not my favorite. After that, I read The Memory Police, and this book was described to me as a dystopian speculative fiction story. And after 1984, that was everything I needed to know to feel like this was going to be a fun time. And it was a fun time. I gave this book 4 stars. And just for a quick overview, this book takes place on a remote Japanese island during an unconfirmed time, but since it was written in the 90s, I guess we can assume it's sometime close to the 90s. And this island is controlled by the Memory Police, whose job it is to disappear items off of the island and ensure that these items are well and truly gone, both in physical form as well as thought. The islanders are grouped into people who can forget and those who can remember. Essentially, after an item is disappeared, the islanders are unable to even remember the item. But as I mentioned earlier, not all people can forget. Our protagonist is an author who grew up with a mother who was taken by the Memory Police because she could not forget. She's working on a novel which appears in the book as almost a story within a story about a woman who loses her voice in a typewriter. And this story is loved by her publisher, who just so happens to be a man with the ability to remember. And because she cares so much about her profession, she decided to ensure that her publisher will be safe from the memory police, and she builds a small section in her home where her publisher can hide. And we watch as our protagonist attempts to protect the people that she loves while slowly losing more and more and more. I thought that this was a very good book. There was so much that wasn't explored, but in a very beautiful way, kind of similar to in 1984, how everything is not spilled out for you, but you're kind of left to come to your own conclusions, but with enough information. And I loved how the story she was writing in some ways mirrored the progression of the world that she was living. Interestingly enough, she mentions a couple times in the book that when she starts a novel, she never really knows where it's going to go, and she just kind of lets it end up where it ends up. For her own novel to end up where it did amidst the reality she was facing was quite poignant. This book just felt very in line with 1984 due to the control of the people and what they think, what they remember, very similar to Thought Crime. And it has a little bit of a found family theme between the people tasked with protecting the publisher as well, which I enjoyed. And the ending of this book was very, very good. I always feel conflicted when it comes to dystopian novels about how they should end, but I can't get over how this book ended. I feel like the ending was extremely appropriate, so I gave it 4 stars. The last book that I read this month was The Will of the Many by James Islington, and this is a fiction book. It is the first book in the Hierarchy series. The second book is actually coming out later this year. In this book, we follow a young orphan in an ancient Rome-inspired country, and in this country, society is organized in a pyramid consisting of 8 levels, and depending on the level that you are on, you have to seed as well as receive well. Only the people with the highest ranking are allowed to not seed well. Our main character Viz is coming into the age where he will have to begin to seed well, and that is the last thing that he wants. So when an unknown man offers Viz the opportunity to attend the most prestigious school in the land, he takes him up on his offer, and it's an offer that is not without expectations. So this book was quite an immersive experience for me. It's a 4-star rating for me, and just as a note, I have all my ratings for the books that I've read on my Goodreads and my Fable, and I'll have that linked in the description as well. And we are following Viz at the school, Katanan Academy, and as he works to improve his standing at the school, he's also fighting to attend the ultimate test at the school, the Unicum, which is a competition where the top senators in society are picked, and not every participant at the school is able to participate in the Unicum. Only the top tier of students, aka level 3s, are allowed to participate in the Unicum. But another thing about Viz is that he was formerly the prince of Suez. Suez is an island republic which was invaded by the Hierarchy, and they also killed all of his family. So Viz is not supposed to be alive. We witness all of his struggles with his history because he cannot reveal his true origins to anyone. Viz begins to feel disoriented because so much of the life that he's living is a lie. This book is very speedy and it feels very, very fast paced. I think it's a good mix of world building, but I felt like the magic system was left a little bit too vague, but it was a good mix of world building, plot, as well as character exploration. The book was written in such an easy to understand way, which is really good because some of the structures and the concept in the book can be extremely difficult to imagine. And this book is in some ways is similar to Babel, with an orphan boy being taken in with expectations to perform in an oppressive society. I am new to the genre of fantasy, but so far I'm enjoying these 2 fantasy books that I read this month. I loved the attention to detail in the world. It felt very distinct and obviously very inspired by ancient Rome. The attention to detail to the locations that we're in, as well as the processes happening in society and the structure of the society. It's very, very, very clear that James has done so much research when it comes to this novel, and he's put that all into creating a world which is both unique and important for us in the world that we're living in today. That can be seen with the concept of the will of the many providing the strength for the few. That is something that once again we are all too familiar with in this world, And in terms of characters, I really enjoyed the steady unraveling as we learn about different characters that are important for the different parts of Viz's journey, and nuanced information that we received about each character, which are tiny bits of information that we receive about characters, say that they have faced persecution or they're keeping secrets, and these little nuances of the characters inform the plot in a very nice way. It's a really good way of like integrating both the characters and our empathy and understanding of them, but also driving the plot forward, and it adds layers and it builds attention in a way that is very appropriate for the book. And I got quite a good sense of who Viz is as a character, even though it's mostly first person narrated, but you kind of understand that from the way that the other characters react to him, that he's sort of like this outsider who's not really supposed to be in these spaces, but he gets to be there because he works his butt off. He is an arrogant man, but he achieves all of his goals either way, so his arrogance does do something for him. One of my favorite moments in the book is how Fizz faces his disadvantages in this hierarchical system, which is clearly rigged against him. When he's faced with bias in a hierarchy and he's put in a position where everyone wants him to lose, he locks in and he pushes through, and he always, usually, sometimes succeeds. But I already knew this was going to be a good book because everyone has been going crazy online about this book for the longest time ever, so I just decided that I should jump on the bandwagon and see what it's all about, and it definitely was an amazing book to read. So that's it for June. I'm gonna leave you guys here, but if you did enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Leave a comment of your favorite book that you read in June, and I'll see you guys in the next one.